Welcome to you both. I have been wanting to talk to you, Brad, for a while about Marsden Point. We had great feedback to the Good Oil report, and I know you've read that. I'll come to that in a moment. And Craig, welcome to you. I've heard about you. I've seen you online. Give people who are not aware of your role in Marsden Point a bit of background on you.
Okay, I've worked in the oil and gas industry for just over 20 years now. I originally was contracting at the refinery back in 97, 98. Well, I actually started in 97. I've been contracting since about 94, 95. The place was, then it was a really good place to work. It was a preferred employer for Northland.
Wow.
There was a lot of people that actually wanted to work there, and it almost, when I actually did get a job there, from being a contractor to actually becoming an operator at the refinery, there was a lot of people saying, who died to allow you to get there? Because that was how tight it was.
It's like a job for life.
It was a very highly regarded job. Yeah. It's an interesting industry, oil and gas, and I progressed up through the stages and learnt the panel and became a senior operator. So I was in charge of looking after a shift, and everything was going great. And then I started thinking that about 2000, we did some projects. We did some major projects there. They built the future fuels, and I think it was 2003, to take the benzene out of fuel to meet the new spec. We started lowering the sulphur and spec on the diesel, and then we upgraded our new, back the original old A block that was built back in the 60s. It's a bit like grandfather's axe. It's had 6 heads and 9 handles, but it's still the same axe. But so
it was still solid. It was still workable.
Yeah, it was still working. We changed the column inside. We changed all the internals in the column and actually tricked the column into thinking it was taller than it was, so we could actually get a better productivity and a far nicer cut of the fuels. In 2010...
Rather than go into that right now, do you know what I'm hearing? I'm hearing someone who really loved his job. When I said job for life, I mean, this is a job you wanted to stay in. Because it seemed to me that Marsden Point created a lot of very visionary Kiwis who were able to use that number 8 wire. Would you agree with that, Brad?
I agree.
What's the quality of the people that you've met who've worked there?
Well, actually, I've met quite a few, and they all have this massive passion, not just for the refinery, but for the evolution of it. And what we've learnt over the last few months, 6 months, I think we've been 187 days outside that refinery, is that 10 years ago it stopped evolving and started being subverted.
I want to stop you there because, Craig, there's something in the Kiwi spirit, isn't there? If governments get out of the way and bureaucrats get out of the way, we are so inventive and creative. Is that what you felt when you were at Marsden Point?
Yeah. Well, everybody knew everybody too, and there wasn't anyone there that didn't actually have value.
Yeah. Or who didn't care about making this better.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. It was all about keeping it going, making the best we possibly could with what we had, which is a typical number 8 wire scenario for Kiwis. Everyone that worked there knew what they did, knew what they were doing. If they weren't sure themselves, they'd ask somebody that did. It was really, really good.
Tricking a column into thinking it's taller than it is. Yeah. I mean, I just love that. That's so Kiwi. I get that image, and I'm not an oil expert.
Yeah. It was all done. It was all designed in fluid dynamics, and we weren't actually sure it was going to work. It should work, and it did. It did work. There's some really, it's the only one in the world like that, and now it isn't.
And we'll come to this. That just breaks my heart. Imagine a government that said to our Kiwi brilliant people, go for it, guys. Let's be really creative and make the best in the world our way. Yeah. Brad, why should every Kiwi care that this is now no longer? This Marsden Point oil refinery is no longer. Why should everyone watching this care?
Well, first off, let's go to the argument as to why you shouldn't care. I've heard multiple times, and even from the platform, that because we can import refined fuel and we have to import crude fuel, it doesn't matter. The reason we should care is because this strategic asset, this piece of infrastructure, didn't just create refined fuel. It created very good quality bitumen. It created sulfur for fertilizer for farmers. It created CO2 for our food industry. And it created high-spec jet fuel, diesel, and petrol. And that wasn't the limit it could have done. It could have turned waste into fuel. It could have turned CO2 in the atmosphere to fuel. It could have been turned into a regenerative energy hub. The sky's the limit for oil and gas in this country. Except what's happened is some ideologues from university have found a shortcut into management, and over 10 years have used subversion to turn it into what they're now proposing, a solar farm. They're going to, people have got to remember, you paid millions to upgrade this refinery. You did. For all intents and purposes, you should own this infrastructure. And now it's being pulled apart, cut off, the cable's cut off down at the ground, and there's an investor presentation that states that this should become a solar farm.
What got you willing to camp for how many days outside this?
Our team have camped outside there for 187 days.
187 days. And what made you say, this is the hill I will die on? I mean, what you're saying is heartbreaking, but was it all of that? Was it my children's children should have this resource?
Well, I used to be in Extinction Rebellion, so there was one point in my life where I thought, this piece of infrastructure, or to quote the words of an individual I spoke to, oil is evil. Once I pulled that all apart, I realised, maybe I hadn't looked into this. And then when I started looking into this and finding out more about how it works and seeing Craig's passion and the passion of other operators, I looked at the people who were sort of fighting, but there was too much apathy there, so the extent of their fight is limited. I felt, these guys and this piece of infrastructure, the strategic asset, really needs people who are actually going to go the extra mile, that are going to extend the level of passion that these operators have and demonstrate it on an activism sphere or an awareness campaign sphere or a solution to this issue to undo the damage that's already been done and push it forward in a better direction.
Brad, can it be undone or is it too late? You were saying it's being decommissioned, it's being shut down, Craig's saying it too. Can we bring it back?
It used to be a pile of sand back in the 60s. And the reality is we don't actually have a choice. Right? The issues that is coming with being reliant on international monopolies is already apparent. We saw that with the Good Oil interview. The work that they've done is excellent.
Yeah.
That's the work we don't have time to do, and they've done it. They've been watching in real time, not long after this, all the issues that are starting to mount up.
Name some of those, Craig, because people watching this who may not have seen the Good Oil one, why will it hit every Kiwi in the pocket if we don't fight for Marsden Point?
We're going to run out of fuel. We're going to get off-grade products. When there's an off-grade product, you've got to turn it around. You can't bring it on board unless someone's game enough to sign it off. Then they become responsible for it.
Be more specific. Off-grade product meaning bitumen that doesn't work on our roads, that results in holes.
Well, we've already got that.
Yeah.
Because we're seeing holes in roads from our heavy rains, the bitumen is from overseas, it's poor quality, and car tyres are being ripped out, aren't they? Because of potholes.
The biggest problem is that the bitumen spec in New Zealand is actually very high because of our climatic conditions. And the amount of bitumen that we would take on a world scale is virtually negligible, well, probably 1% of production of bitumen. So to ask another company in another country to make us 1% of their product to meet our spec and then ship it all the way over here, you're right.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
When the refinery itself was running, we had our own little bitumen plant and we did about 70% of the product in New Zealand. So the off-grade stuff or the imported stuff, we could actually adjust ours to make that okay. So if theirs was a little bit runny, we could make ours a little bit harder. When you mix them together, they'll all become back to the spec.
How wonderful. We could make it specific for New Zealand.
It's like baking a cake.
Yeah.
If you put too much of something in it, you can adjust your mix and then make it come right. But if it turns up and it's got the wrong mix in it, you're stuffed.
And that's the same for fuel.
Fuel's
If you had off-grade fuel or fuel that wasn't up to standard that came here, you put it through the refinery, you bring it to standard, and then it goes to the market. Yeah. If you get fuel that's not up to spec, or you've got diesel that's got too much water in it, you're either sending it back and waiting and you've got a shortage, or people are going to have to wear the cost on their filters.
Or you hope.
Yeah.
It makes no sense, even for those people who are convinced that climate change is this huge threat that they're trying to make everyone fearful of.
Which I was convinced of.
Which you were too. It makes no sense shipping it all the way when we could have.
You're not solving the problem. I mean, let's come at it from a climate change believer perspective.
Yeah.
You're having to ship everything miles and miles and miles rather than creating it here yourself, being responsible for your carbon emissions, creating infrastructure that sucks it in and turns it back into fuel, turning it into a regenerative resource. I mean, for crying out loud, on this land, we have about 27 to 28% of our country covered in native forests. Our research reports are saying continually that these evergreen forests sequester 1.5 kilograms of CO2 per square metre. You do the math, that's 120 million tonnes of CO2 sequestered per year. Our annual emissions are 79.8 million tonnes of CO2. That's our annual emissions. We're already in the negative if we leave our forests alone. Up in Northland, we've been doing that. Our rate of native forests have increased dramatically. So what do we have to do? We just have to be responsible, create self-sustainability, and be mindful of our actions. That's it. Doing this, off-sourcing everything to monopolies who don't care about our values, is not addressing the climate change issue anyway.
No. All you're doing is they've still got to make the fuel that we use anyway.
And we don't know what they're emitting over there. They could have terrible emission standards in the country we get it from.
We are still in the same world. And the other downside to that is all of those people that are making it now aren't buying stuff from New Zealand. They're not shopping in the local towns or driving down to Queenstown and going skiing.
Yeah, he's not spending his wages that he doesn't get in Whakareia.
All of the and the worst thing is a lot of the guys that used to work there that I know, probably 30% of them have gone to Australia.
That's heartbreaking.
Yeah, which is, they've got jobs. Unfortunately, their wives, their teachers, their lawyers, their nurses, their doctors. So you didn't just lose one employee, and you've lost their children. And guess what those children are going to grow up to be?
How many employees were there up there at the height of it?
Operations, there was about 110 of us, and I think there's 10 left running the tank farm.
How are they feeling, Craig?
Most of them have got international numbers now because they're not here anymore. So they're sold up and gone.
Were they as heartbroken as I can tell you are? You can...
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
you can feel something really special has been lost.
It's disappearing. It's disappointing just because of the fact that the people that had all of this that could have just run it properly, just seem oblivious to the fact that they're doing whatever they've been told.
Why is it the bureaucrats get in charge of these things and the talent that's at the coal face, literally at the oil face, which is you? Why don't any of you rise up and get through the bureaucracy and lead these things instead of these bureaucrats?
We're just not heard.
That's actually a really good question.
Yeah. We tried hard, but there's not enough of us. Yeah.
And they wouldn't listen to you, the people working?
They didn't get it.
What were you going to say, Brad?
Say that bureaucracy or your so-called intellectuals are possessed by climate ideology. Yeah. You don't want people in these management of this infrastructure that you despise. So coming from a psychological perspective, maybe they're not as easy as to subvert as the individuals coming out of university. If you want to undermine a piece of infrastructure so you can monopolise that industry offshore and be the sole source of truth or resources, You don't put people who are passionate about evolving and improving that piece of infrastructure into management. You put people who are ideologically possessed into that position.
And look at our politicians. I can remember 20 years ago in the dark days when I was in mainstream media thinking Helen Clark's never actually worked in the real world. She came out of university into politics, and Ardern seems to have been the same, a marketing degree, and then telling us all how to run our bodies.
Yep, and you look at the CEO of Channel Infrastructure. She's an employment lawyer.
Channel Infrastructure, let's go into that. So it was NZ Refinery, wasn't it, that ran this place? Yep. And when did that change to Channel?
Fool's Day this year, wasn't it?
Yeah,
April
that's
Fool's
the
Day.
irony. Yeah.
Yeah.
Really?
Yep.
Yeah.
And what was that change about? Why was there a change of name and a change of structure?
It's just a rebranding because it seemed silly to call a tank farm a refinery, refining New Zealand, and it's a tank farm.
What do you know about the deals that were done behind closed doors, about the gradual closing down of this amazing resource for Kiwis? Has this been over decades or the last few years?
Well, I left in 2011 and went to Australia because I was interested in doing a large project, and the management that we had at the time, we were entertaining putting in a new platformer, which they did, unfortunately, but when I left, they had no intention of doing that.
A platformer is?
Platform is what we make petrol out of.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
pretty basic terms. And I wanted to do a larger project, so I got approached from Australia and went over there to start up and commission an LNG plant. And I was with that crowd on the East Coast for probably 15 months, and then I went to the West Coast because I had a bigger one for a company offshore, and that was awesome. That's really big gear. And the strange thing is people are under the illusion that our refinery is big. It's not. It's a toy.
Really?
Yeah.
But it was small, but it was efficient, wasn't it? It was kind of...
only had to service 5 million people.
Yeah, it was built for our purpose.
Yeah.
For me, the fight from basically and I'm not sure Craig can talk to this, but based off what I've seen, and this is all public knowledge, like a lot of the good stuff that Good Oil put out.
Yeah.
The financial mismanagement for me started around when Andrew Brewer got in. There was a push to, I guess, see the bitumen plant as something that was either surplus to requirement or something that they just couldn't keep going. From what I understand, bitumen is money for jam, especially when you're creating about 70% of the product. So you shut.
So what? It was a very profitable part of Marsden Point.
Yeah. So when you shut that down, and it was shut down good 2 years ago now.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's when things started really getting worse. Then COVID hit. So there's a chain of events of subverting the way the business was evolving. Bitumen plant, COVID. They had all the excuses they needed to say, this is not profitable. We need to get out of the business of refining and simply be the middleman for fuel. Now, they told everyone that it would be cheaper to import it. What they didn't tell everyone is who it would be cheaper for. Because if you look at those prices on the pumps, it's not the consumer.
No.
And right now, nobody's making any money off the creation of fuel from refining. Government's not making any money because they've had to get rid of all the tax off it just to keep everyone from losing it.
The question has to be why. Craig, do you understand why?
I don't
How
understand
can
why.
any
I think
government be
logically-
this incompetent?
I think logically, so I can't understand why.
And
Right.
I look in the subversion field. So to me, seems when you delve into this ideology that's been created, you can find a logical reason for it. Get rid of morals and look at this through the scope of progress, or like what I like to say, hypothetical progress. You're possessed by your ideology. You think roads are unsustainable. You're against oil and gas.
You're against farmers.
Yep. Your solution now is big tech, big data, electrifying everything. Okay? You need to find a way to get rid of this all. You need to do it in a way so it doesn't look like you're doing it openly, like waging open war. You need to do it in a way that uses subterfuge, subversion. all you have to do is undermine everything through certain key areas. And that's what they've done. If you don't want people driving on roads anymore, make them undrivable. If you don't want people buying fuel anymore, make it too expensive.
And this is where people say, hey, this is too much. No government would work against its own people. We're going to vote in a new government in a year, supposedly.
You're thinking about it the wrong, if they're thinking that, they're thinking about it the wrong way.
Good, tell us why.
The government are working for their ideology.
This is important that people understand this. Explain it a bit more, Brad.
If you want to know somebody's motives, look at the consequences of their actions, right? Look at their belief structure. What do they believe in? They believe in climate change. They believe in electrifying everything, decarbonising everything. If you want to know why this is all happening, just ask who's doing it, who are they, and why. And the answer's pretty clear, right? They believe in everything that they have been taught fundamentally. It's dogma. And it's all through the universities. Like people say, why is this happening? And they're surprised. That's fine. You're coming from a perspective of creationism. You want to create things, and you have a moral fortitude, which is good. If you don't have morals, how do you know what good is? These people, they don't think like that. They're moral relativists. They've subscribed. They've got a goal. They've moved all the barriers out of the way. And with callous disregard, like Thanos from Avengers, are heading towards it at breakneck speed. Calvin Alp says it himself. When they're 100 metres away from the finish line, they'll be stark naked, because they can. They're almost there. Yuri Bezmenov said, most people won't know what's going on until they're kicking the door in. It's apathy. It's also a sense of, I'm not sure what the solution is to this, because they have subverted everything. But the solution is very simple. Go back to basics. What do you do well if you're not for this? You build the solution.
Take me into that more. Meaning what? So we've got somebody at home whose brain right now is melting down. Are you telling me, they're going, are you telling me Jacinda Ardern is not kind, is not working for me, has an ideology that might root back to her being in Klaus Schwab's Young Leaders School? That's verifiable. We can see the tape where she's calling everybody comrades.
Still a socialist?
I describe myself as a social democrat.
So you're not hardcore socialist?
No, because as I say, my words, my bond.
I've watched as international politics has continued to change while serving as the president of the International Union of Socialist Youth, an umbrella organisation of over 150 progressive youth movements from around the world. Some people have asked me if I am a radical. My answer to that question is very simple.
Comrades, 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 comrades. Remember that you have comrades around the world fighting for the same principles, fighting for the same things. You have solidarity. Comrades, 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 our LGBT comrades, 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 together as comrades. Then and only then will we win the war. Viva UC Viva! Viva UC Viva!
See, somebody sent me an email, a video actually last Friday, and it had you talking at the Socialist Union International, whatever it's called.
Yes, yes.
And you mentioned the word comrade about 4 times in a minute. What was that about?
It was a rally, and I would have been about 25 years old. Well, I can't remember which country it was
Do you
in.
think it's changed since those days?
No, not particularly.
We know that communism has a certain ideology. If we can accept that as a starting point, there are ideologues in our government who will sacrifice us as a people for their ends.
For the greater good.
Then we can start to make sense of the idiocy of closing down an oil refinery that was serving all of us and is a national treasure. Now we can start in this mad Alice in Wonderland world to say there's some upside down sense to this. What can someone whose brain right now is frying on that, what can they do? They go, what can I do? Shrug their shoulders, I just don't want to hear it. Or is there something you can give them, Brad, where they can say, I'll get hold of this? I'll stand up with Brad and Craig and Liz and all the rest of us who are trying to say there's something here to look at, Kiwis. What would you say?
First question, how were they able to do all of this? What should have been in place that prevented them from doing this? Constitution, right?
Yeah.
And it's the same with anything. In this country, we have trusts. The government, for example, is a trust. It's an implied trust, which means whoever gets the helm of the ship, whether it be Jacinda Ardern or some interest groups or international interest groups, they can change the terms of that, right? The refinery.
Can I pick you on that, on that, Brad? They're also only in there by our giving them our trust. We can withdraw our trust of them.
Yes, the trusts are meant to benefit the beneficiaries, not the trustees.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, but they're not anymore.
Well, that's the problem with implied consent and implied trusts, right? You can manipulate people to be for things that don't actually benefit them. That's why you need express conditions. People need to have informed consent and express knowledge over what they're signing up for.
And that's where a constitution comes in, a Bill of Rights as well, that is above everything.
Yeah, so what the United States would have if they had a constitution that couldn't be changed is an express constitution, right? So you have an implied trust and an express trust. What would keep the refinery from going through all this stuff again? So we acknowledge we live in a continent that has huge oil and gas reserves. We acknowledge the fact that we need to be trending in a more responsible direction when it comes to utilising these resources. And so we need to bind our infrastructure and our assets, particularly our strategic assets, to an express trust that protects that asset from being subverted or undermined, and make sure it's heading in the direction of perpetual improvement. And we make sure that that perpetual improvement is defined by the people that actually know how it works. So that's where you'd start.
Yeah, that's brilliant. So we get advice from those who are like Craig and highly trained. How many years of experience have you had, Craig, in this whole field?
Over 20.
Over 20. And every day you were trying out new things, you were refining your ideas along with refining the oil. This was a very creative job, it feels to me. Is that right?
Yeah, it's a very enjoyable job.
And you had to be agile.
Yeah, and you had to actually understand it.
Yeah.
You couldn't just go, I know what that is, I know what that is, but you didn't know how they intertwined with each other. You had to actually understand the animal that it was.
So take it back to what I asked Brad. If we want to protect this, if we want to fight for this resource, Craig, what do you think Kiwis can do? This constitution idea is a lovely idea. It's still a bit esoteric.
We need to find out who's accountable and have a look and see exactly why we ended up in this position.
Right.
For them to say that it was unprofitable, I think if you look up on the stock exchange, they were running cost neutral in 2020, 21. We weren't even at full noise. We're still not at full, as far as the importing and that goes at the moment, we're still down about 50% of the jet fuel. So obviously we're not flying as much. That's probably because we've got no pilots because they're all off farming or gone somewhere else. I'm not sure of that. But there definitely seems to be a shortage if we've only got 50% of our jet running. The guys that were sitting out at the dig and said, hey, there's not many trucks. This was a month or so ago. There are not many trucks going into the tanker loading because under this new structure of channel infrastructure, the 170 odd boats that are coming into New Zealand now to fuel up all around the country instead of the 30 odd large crude ships that used to come in. Whangarei is to supply Auckland and Northland. Right, so it would just pump some across the road and the trucks would just come in and fill up and then go off around, I think it was from North Shore north, they would deliver fuel. So they'd come out to Ruakaka, fill up their truck, tear off up to Kaitaia, tear off out to Paihia and tear off down to North Shore, etc., and do all the fueling from there. Then that stopped for a while. And there's an eagle eye in Good Oil, old Carl.
Carl's good.
He's right up on these. He's an awesome guy. He's right up on the marine stuff, and when all of this was happening, he said, hey, there's a boat in at Auckland. I said, well, I didn't think they're shipping it down there. And anyway, about 2 or 3 days later, the trucks started happening again. I was in at the service station, and I was talking to one of the truckies that was actually topping up the tanks at the local gas station, and he was from Tauranga. I couldn't understand that. Another chap I talked to was from Auckland. I was thinking, well, hang on a second, so we're piping it down to you and then driving it back up? That doesn't seem to make sense to me, considering that Northland was meant to be supplied from just outside the gate. Whatever the
I need you to take us through this a bit more. So normally it came in up there, and then it was brought down to Auckland. What you're saying now is
the pipeline takes it.
Yeah.
Because the Whangarei Harbour, like the refinery, was the Auckland Northland drop-off point for the fuel.
Yes.
Right. We used to actually make it all, and then we had coastal tankers that would take it all around the country. Now it's coming from wherever it's coming from, China or Malaysia. They're driving it all the way down and round to Christchurch and then back.
That is so inefficient.
It's awesome, eh? Yeah, I couldn't understand.
I thought that I'd missed something. The inefficiency of what you've described to me just then
But now, apparently it's cheaper than making it ourselves.
Now imagine that they ran out of diesel and had to get an emergency tanker in, which would have cost them about $80,000 at birth, because they didn't have enough to supply Northland and Auckland. Then had to truck it all the way up. Yeah.
There's no accountant who would look at what you just described and say, on paper, that makes economic sense.
Yeah, I don't know. Again, it's only speculation. It just seems strange that we had Tauranga trucks dropping our fuel off.
We seem so vulnerable. You just said there are 170 tankers?
Thereabouts, yeah.
Thereabouts, yeah.
And how many did there used to be?
About 30, 35 crude ships.
That was what we needed.
Yep.
So there's this massive new demand. We seem very vulnerable. What is our vulnerability in New Zealand?
Well, one thing Craig says a lot that you can't really argue with is maybe we should have all our options on the table and investigate them robustly before we dive headfirst in one direction.
Yeah.
We have not done that at all. We've dived headfirst in this direction, and the myriad of problems are presenting themselves and accumulating and are piling up on top of each other as each day goes by. And Carl and those guys from Good Oil, David Trotter and that, are watching it real time.
And there is virtually no mainstream media discussion on this. It feels to me like this is a whole film. There should be a film on the destruction of this incredibly important resource. But when I said, what's our vulnerability? What sort of storage have we got for mum and dad who want to drive their vehicles to work, or whatever our farmers need for their tractors? What's our fuel supply?
I think the guys over in Good Oil had it right. About 14 days. It takes about 18 days to get here.
So we could be so easily run down to no transport in this country. Am I right there, Craig?
That sounds pretty right.
Road to zero.
Road to zero. It may not be deaths, it might be cars.
Road to zero travelling whatsoever.
If we can't get our food around because no trucks are able to run because we've got no fuel.
Or if we can't use the digital platforms as freedom fighters to interact and coordinate our efforts to push back against this tyranny, and we won't be able to travel to see each other kanohi ki te kanohi.
Okay, back to the solutions. You said a constitution. It's still a little bit esoteric because how are we going to bring that in? I'm Liz at home and I want to make a difference. I want to stand up and help the dig-in at Marsden. What can I do? I'm watching this and I'm thinking, I'm going to stand with the Marsden people. What would you like to see, Brad?
So first step, awareness. People have got to know that this is happening.
Where can they dig in and find more information? Yeah.
SecureMarsdenRefinery.nz has a lot of the information, and the Good Oil guys have been sharing a lot of that information as well. Yeah. We've got, on the news part of that, we've got videos where me and Craig talk about the specifics. We've got the first episode being about fuel, the second episode being about CO2, and the third episode being about bitumen. And really, am just trying to share that awareness out there. We know repetition works. The repetition of the little lie and the big lie has worked to subvert everyone's opinion of the reality of everything. We need to repeat the truth out as much times as possible. So getting visual everywhere. At the pumps, stickers on the pumps. wearing clothing that is directing attention to our energy independence. Make no doubt about it, if we lose our energy independence, rather diversity of energy sources here in this nation, we're not going to be able to do a damn thing. Or we're just going to have to get super innovative. So first step, awareness. Second step, conversation, because that's democracy. Conversation about how robust this solution's going to be. How are we going to reacquire the strategic asset? And how then are we going to use that express trust to make sure that this doesn't happen again? It's going to take, what, about 2 years to get this thing up and running again?
Probably.
So time's not on our side. So the awareness campaign really needs to ramp up big time. And this is going to be something that's going to open a lot of doors, right? It's been hard to open doors and have people listen to the COVID issue, right? Even though we've got some pretty good, robust arguments for that. Everyone is affected by this. It's not something they can turn into a conspiracy theory. You've just lost your strategic asset. For what reason? Nobody can explain it. But you're not happy about the roads, you're not happy about the quality of fuel, and you're not happy about the price of it. This affects your ability to get food, get from A to B, and see your loved ones, and plan and prepare for a better future for your children.
And let's not forget price of food. Everybody knows that transport's involved in the price of food.
You inflate the price of transport, you inflate the price of food.
Absolutely. So every Kiwi is affected. Where can they buy the Dig In at Marsden t-shirts on the same site? So wear it, put stickers out about it, get people talking about it, and then push back in the next election. Craig, this needs to be a central election issue for the next government, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Do you know what National's promising in terms of opposition to what this government's doing?
I don't think anyone's got anything to say at the moment.
They're staying silent?
It's just blank stares from everyone.
Brad, what have you looked into?
They've made some vague statements about how they thought it should be mothballed. We went and asked the operators whether mothballing was a possibility. The word impossible was stated.
Yeah.
Explain mothballing. What does that involve, Craig?
Would have been park it in a safe state. It probably would have just been all cleaned out and then just held in nitrogen.
Yeah.
So that it wouldn't oxidise and there was no chance of any exothermic reactions or anything like that with it. And you can sit it like that probably for a couple of years. Anything longer than that and you're going to start getting stuff leaching out of the steel. But I think 2 years probably would have been long enough to have proven the terminal.
So it would have been long enough to get mad ideologues out and get practical people in power.
Yeah.
Or worst case scenario, if there was an upcoming issue with, say, we couldn't, all of a sudden there was something happening in the Middle East and we couldn't get refined fuel, we could have at least got it back up and running quick smart.
And now contrast that with what they've actually done, because there have been all these rumours of concrete being poured into pipes. How bad has the sabotage of it been?
The only turnaround you've got now is import terminal. Or nothing.
Explain that. So everything else has been, what's happened to it?
To the point where you won't be able to get it going again without spending a major investment on it. Like we said, 2 years to get it going again. So if we run out of, say there's an issue with shipping at the moment and we've got no fuel, we can wait 2 years until we could get it back together, maybe, if you're lucky.
That's now. That's with what they've done so far.
Yep, they've done a number on it, but it doesn't matter. You don't have a choice, and you're going to find out why sooner or later.
We're import only, and we have to get this back, and we have to suck up that it could cost billions and take 2 years. Yeah. What could it cost to get this back up?
Or we can come up with something better.
That's a good question, Craig.
What's that?
And what could it cost?
To get it up. Say we had a good government right now.
You wouldn't build it.
If we had a good government right now, we wouldn't be in this position.
No, but if we had a good government that said this has been a muck-up, we have a snap election, she's out, we have a good government, they say, got to get Marsden Point up and running, we'll support you all the way. How much, what are we looking at on the books? Millions, billions, do you reckon?
It wouldn't cost as much as the health response.
Yeah, the health response. What we
But
could
at
have
least
done
you get something out of it.
what we could have done with that COVID money. But are we talking billions to get it back up?
I would say if you wanted it in a hurry. The trick is a lot of the parts that you'll need are quite long lead, meaning you've got to order them now and it'll take 6 months to get here anyway.
What, to come from China?
To come from whoever's going to build them. A lot of them, a lot of that stuff was built in Korea.
Can we not make it ourselves?
No, we don't have the technology.
No, subversion of it, a lot of our industries has been played out for a long time.
Yeah.
It's like we've had these people crippling us and we haven't even seen it.
No.
So what have they done to the resource? You said it's not mothballed. What is it? Is it just partly destroyed? What would I see if I went up there?
It would be to the point where they've cut all the cables off all the motors and things like that, so that you can't use them again. They've taken some strategic parts away and scrapped them, and it's like if you're not going to use your car again, you just walk out and smash the carburetor off. That's sort of the intelligence level that we're at.
That just makes no sense. And this was, as you said, Brad, at the beginning, our resource, the people's resource.
We paid for all the infrastructure, absolutely.
Yeah, it was government owned. The government built it. This is all think big.
This was our grandparents that started to put this in place in the 60s, 65. I have come to this issue so late, as many Kiwis have, because I've had my eyes elsewhere and so much on my plate. But Brad, when did it first really cross your radar?
When I joined the Social Credit Party back at the last election. So I came across and I had the same thing as well. I mean, it's hard to ignore the whole COVID thing, and that was the most pressing issue. I mean, I even voiced this at multiple meetings, that how can I be expected to focus on this issue when kids are being put at risk?
Yes.
And people nodded to that. But after the Parliament occupation and my first-hand experience of subversion, and then sort of chaining together a chain of events that would, you start with health, and then you subvert people's ability to get around, then I could sort of see a little bit further ahead. I thought, no, they're right. I've got to be able to somehow keep working on that good argument for the COVID narrative, but put a huge amount of my energy into getting people to start looking towards this as being a serious issue soon.
This will affect everybody if we don't stand up. Yeah. And even if we stand up, can we make a difference? Really, Brad?
Oh, yeah. You see, one of the things I said down at Parliament when I was on a media training thing for narrators, if you're being interviewed by a hostile interviewer, they got us to make a statement. And my statement was, we don't have a democracy. And the trainer laughed and she said, that's just ridiculous. You can't say that. No, that's just nonsense. And even one of the individuals who was with me sort of agreed. And I said, well, hang on a sec. Isn't democracy a conversation? And she agreed. And I said, well, if the politicians are refusing to engage in a conversation with us, where's the democracy down at Parliament? And she said, oh, that's good. What we really need to do, and anything's possible, remember that used to be a pile of sand, is the freedom movement need to come together and have those damn difficult conversations so we can find solutions to complex problems. We don't, each individual does not have all the answers, but spread amongst us, we have some bloody good solutions if we can put our heads together. The division stuff, the internal subversion, whether it's on purpose or accidental, we need to find a way to overcome all of that and put our heads together, because we don't have a choice. We don't have a choice. We don't get to fail on this. We always win in the end, and it's a matter of how much suffering we have to go through, and I'm tired of suffering. It's time to put our heads together and figure out solutions to this problem, and then find a way to create solutions that not only solve this problem, but create compounding solutions for other problems. Yeah. We can do that.
I haven't gone into the politics, and I won't have. I know there's a certain division on the Marsden Point issue. I like that you're really reaching out and praising the good oil side of things, and that feels really conciliatory. We're going to have a lot of that, aren't we, Brad?
Well, that's true. That's true. What
a lot of finding the good in each other.
Yeah.
And come together.
I like what Calvin says, and I'm like that too. I mean what I say, and I say what I mean. Yeah. They did good work. Yeah. Whatever our differences were in the past, doesn't matter.
That is the way we bring New Zealand together. And this government is depending on us being divided. That's Māori Pākehā, jab, non-jab, Marsden Point this side, Marsden Point that side. We've got to stop the division.
Yep, and the way you overcome that, and the way you take away the enemy's ability to wage war on you without you waging war and being the contradictory fool, is to find the similarities that unite you and play to those strengths. What are you good at, bro? Awesome. Do that and do it well. Yeah. All right, I'm good at this, I'll do it and do it well. I ain't going to worry about your shortcomings, you ain't going to worry about my shortcomings. So long as we focus on our strengths and we do it well and we paddle in the same direction, all together as one, we'll get there.
Absolutely, against a government that's trying to divide us and trying to undermine us.
Oh yeah, and remember the word government, governmental, govern the mind. How can you bring kindness and compassion to a word like that?
Yeah. Government, yeah, because ment is from mens in Latin, which is the mind. It's incredible. Governing of the mind. It's what they're trying to do. We just said about doing it well, Craig. What countries are doing oil refinery well? Is Australia really going the way we should be going? You talked about these big plants you worked at.
That was LNG. That's energy.
Okay.
As well, but like, yeah, that's going gangbusters at the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. The fuel side of things, where we seem to be tending towards alternatives, like they're talking hydrogen, and they're banging on about electric here at the moment. Is electric the future? I don't know. I'm pretty sure our infrastructure isn't up to electric.
Meaning that our grid won't be able to support.
Well, you get 20 people in an older street like this, and we'll plug in their car at once. I'm pretty sure you ain't going to do it.
Yeah.
California couldn't cope about a month ago. They were asked not to drive their electric cars because the pull was too great. So nobody had transport because Gavin Newsom's taken them to electric, like Ardern is.
And we've got our lakes. We've already had shortages with just our lakes at the moment. Obviously, they want to get rid of Huntley because that's running on Indonesian coal at the moment, worse than the big pile that it's sitting on. And if you're going to run on solar and wind, then I guess you can just use the power when it's windy or sunny, which is very sporadic.
Well, you can build up a backlog, but is it enough?
Well, you've got to store it somehow, don't you?
Yeah.
And if people are plugging it into their cars, there won't be much storage. It'll be on the vehicles. The other thing too is, oh, hang on a second, I lost it now. Go.
No, it's really interesting because I'm also hearing some of our wonderful inventors are looking at steam. There are new ways to use steam in this country. Possibly that could be a way.
You've still got to fire it somehow, though.
Yeah.
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 That was what I was going to say. Is also we actually pay a hell of a lot for our fuel, for our electricity already.
Yes.
Right, and most of it is made from falling water, which doesn't involve much mechanical. You've got a lake up on a hill and you drop it down a pipe at a turbine. It's not really that labour intensive. What happens once the electricity companies are supplying the other 300 million litres of fuel out the light socket or out the power socket? How expensive is it going to be to cook a chicken or turn the light on if it's now fuel?
And if you're mostly reliant on water for energy, you're basically just monopolising yet again.
Yeah.
Your solution is, and you said this morning, the solution to pollution is dilution. Well, the solution to our energy independence is diversity and responsibility.
Yeah.
The solution, it seems to me, to our governance is that as well. Let's diversify, let's get it back to small hubs all around the country, get it away from centralisation. Centralisation, Brad, has been a real issue, hasn't it?
Yeah, let's entertain more perspectives so we can get closer to reverberating to the truth. Right? You're pursuing the truth, you're not holding truth completely, you're not the single source. The moment you start saying that is the moment you make people dumber and more reliant and dependent on you, the hypothetical source of truth. Truth is found in a billion or trillions or an infinite amount of molecules, right? Your ability to get a very accurate and well-articulated perspective from all these different people is going to form the basis of a strong democracy. If you're eliminating so many perspectives or so many sources of truth, you're creating a lie.
And that's what we saw with COVID. And that's the pattern we're seeing everywhere. Okay, so this is a really interesting discussion. But again, I get back to what can you offer for Kiwis who say, I don't want Marsden Point to shut down now. Do you think we can do anything in the next year? Or is it...
Every day you can do something, right? Yeah. Reach in deep down to yourself. Check out what we've already done. Add to it. Yeah. You know, I see you're lacking here. This would help get the word out, or even create or even put a solution forward to us. Like that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to embody that whilst putting forward our solution. We need all of you, right? The emails there, the website's there. We're here. We need you as well.
What's happening up at Diggin at Marsden? How many people are left there now?
The ranges, it changes from time to time. We have people that come and go from Auckland and hold the space there.
Are they having any effect, any real effect?
Oh yeah, I mean, we had an email just the other day where a guy emailed us and he said, "Hey, I miss you guys on the roundabout. What's going on there? I haven't seen you at the roundabout for a while." I said, "We've reduced the roundabout activity to focus on the mobile spearhead tour. So we're actually building a self-sustainable convoy, and so we're building a self-contained unit that goes on a trailer, and we're going to tour around the country, and we're going to bring our proposed solution, our proposed constitution, and the reasons why it's important to reinstate Marsden Point Refinery and what avenues we think might be a good way to go around. So we're going to bring the issue to, hopefully, bring the issue to every town in the country."
Okay, and for those who, Craig, are right down the climate change route, who are convinced that anything with oil is just so bad for the environment, how do you think they can start to self-educate to realise they may have been duped?
If they're serious about doing everything and not using oil or anything like that, then how about they just go through their wardrobe and chuck out anything that's got a hydrocarbon base in it, which you'll end up probably with an empty house. It's used everywhere. Get rid of your perfumes because hydrocarbons are in everything.
Yeah.
And it all comes from a derivative of oil and gas somewhere along the line.
It's so
we're a carbon-based life form, and it's integrated into so much of what we use that you probably wouldn't be watching this now.
Yeah. So, Brad, how did you uneducate a mind that had been kind of hypnotized into a certain way of thinking? How did you wake yourself up? Because a lot of our young are down this kind of semi-hypnotized route that the governments wanted them to go down.
First, identification. I had to identify that what I was suffering from was dogma. Then I had to identify that what I knew was not all I could know. And then I had to ask the question, is reducing our carbon emissions about the environment? And is it popular now because we've all of a sudden become environmental? Well, next question is, what's the solution? Solution is to go heavy into mining and create a whole bunch of things that store energy and that aren't very sustainable. It's not a sustainable option. So the question to climate change is this really about the environment? Or is this because we've found a way to make this resource regenerative, thus creating the perpetual deflation of price because it's now in abundance, and we have to switch, and the big corporates want us to switch to something that's scarce so they can charge a premium on it. Let's ask that question and investigate that angle, shall we?
Wow.
If we really want to be environmental, we have to learn more about everything. We have to have a comprehension of our environment and how we can pursue living in symbiosis with it, because you're never going to get it perfect. But what you can do is every day take a look at yourself in the mirror and ask yourself, how can I be better in everything that I do? And that includes refining. You don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater to save your environmental problems. All you have to do is ask yourself, how can I do this better? And what does nature do?
There is a chance for that, isn't there? The way you were talking right at the beginning about what this refinery was doing, you were constantly tweaking it to make it better, cleaner, more efficient. Talk about the jet fuel. What was the quality of our jet fuel?
Our jet fuel was really high spec because we had to put it down the pipeline, and with the low spec diesel that we were making, the jet, if we were to make it to the standard spec, the international spec, which is 2,000 parts per million of sulphur, it would put the diesel off grade. So we were making it 300 parts per million to put it down the pipeline to Auckland so that it wouldn't put the diesel off. So we must be getting 300 ppm kero for our pipeline, or the diesel would probably get put off grade.
And what about our diesel? What was the quality of our diesel like when it was coming out of Marsden Point?
World standard.
World standard meaning?
Yeah. Well, we were down to 5 parts per million.
And what do you think it might be now with all of this imported stuff?
Well, it has to be that.
Yeah.
But I think was it the Good Oil guys pointed out that they had no way of finding out whether it was or not. Eh?
Well, you'd have to get the every load would be sampled, and someone would have to sign off on it.
Are there reservations for you seeing all this imported electricity, all this imported energy coming in? What are your reservations?
We're at the risk of whatever they send us, really.
Yeah,
and if, like the Good Oil guys were saying, if we've got 14 days storage and it's 18 days to get it, if a load turns up and it's not right, well, there's at least 4 days out with none.
All right, it's been a wide-ranging conversation, Brad. I think people need to be aware about this ideology that's running the country. This is a brilliant gateway issue, as I think COVID is a gateway issue. Once you understand Marsden Point, you understand a whole lot about a lot of other lies and misbeliefs that are being foisted on Kiwis. It is a real gateway one to get into. So your site name again?
SecureMarsdenRefinery.nz.
Lovely. How are you coping financially with all of this that you've been doing?
We're pretty minimalist right from the start, so...
You've given a lot for this, haven't you?
Yeah.
What have you? What's it cost you?
Lots of sleep, less time with family, a lot of stress trying to keep the people who are down there day after day calm. It's hard to stay outside a place that's very busy for 187 days, trying to heal interpersonal relationship issues. For me, Wellington never ended. For a lot of the guys down there, Wellington definitely didn't end. They need a lot more help. But all in all, I'm content with what I'm doing. It feels meaningful. It feels right. I don't think if I could do anything again, I would probably do the same thing, just better. But every day is a learning experience. And, to me, it doesn't really matter whether we're struggling financially or not. We have a home. We're quite lucky we have a home. We're in nature. We're with our family. And every now and then I get to go into town, out to the refinery to see my other family and make sure that they're still good. And they're very passionate people. They're amazing people.
They're good people.
It takes something special to dedicate. It's going to be 200 days soon to a cause like this. And we just want to thank everybody out there that's been continually supporting us. And we all support you too. I mean, there's a wonderful beach down there. I mean, the guys are constantly going and catching fish. It's a much more lovely sight than Parliament. And the police up there have been very understanding and great. We haven't had any issues with them. They've been, they comprehend our cause. They support us, so it's very relaxed there.
And give us your account number if people want to put some money in. We can put some money in to help that group up there.
Oh, I couldn't tell you off by heart.
But you can give it and we'll put it up at the end.
No problem.
Craig, are we going to lose you to New Zealand? Because I can feel that you're really committed to this place, but you could be tempted to go offshore, couldn't you?
Yeah, I have
offers,
options.
I bet you do.
I've turned a few down. I'm not interested in doing some things. There's one I want to do, but that's not up until sometime middle next year.
Is that overseas?
Yep.
It's such a wasted resource.
It is what it is.
It is. It just.
I've got to feed myself somehow.
Yeah, I'm going to miss going and having kombucha, and he's become a really good friend.
Would you ever think of standing, either of you, politically on this issue? Saying we're going to stand in the next election, please Kiwis, if you want us to help reopen this. Would you ever think about that, Craig?
I have approached a couple of people regarding those sort of things, and we're open.
You're open?
We're open.
Right.
We have to see.
That's a difficult question for me to answer because I know the nature of this government. Once you know the nature of it, you kind of inclined to want something else created. So
The thing I feel, for all its corruptions, if good Kiwis can get their foot in the door and bring some light into the darkness of Parliament, we can begin these conversations, we can begin to make the changes, we can begin to devolve power. But while they run the show, the rotten ones run the show, we can't even begin those conversations, can we?
That's true, but I'm also for governance, and governance has express constraints created by the beneficiaries of said trust. This structure doesn't.
No.
It doesn't. When you sign a contract to become an employee for the Crown, you may likely be signing up to contracts that the other idiots have already signed. So if I was to stand, I would have to have full knowledge over what I'm standing for, and I would have to constrain myself in some way to the wishes and wills of my constituents. Maybe that's by putting a party or myself in an express trust and binding myself to the constitution of said express trust. I don't know. I'm still learning all those law type things. But that's what it would have to be. I would have to be chained through good legal documentation to what my constituents need to thrive. If there's none of that, I can't do it, because I don't want to live long enough to see myself become the enemy. I'd rather die a hero.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, and yet I think on the most simple level, if you said, I'm going to reopen Marsden Point and I'm standing on that, I think given how important this issue is, you might even get my vote. I
would have to prove that there was a proven pathway to do that.
Yeah.
Right.
So you're not willing to make empty promises.
Right. Yeah.
That already puts you well apart from most politicians. I mean, it's bringing the people with us, and we hope this interview has been a start for that. It raises so many issues. I'm going to ask something of both of you that I ask of everyone. If Jacinda Ardern had just walked in here and she was standing right in front of you there, and you had this minute to give her a real eyeball, say, use her name, Jacinda. Start with you, Brad. Looking down that camera, what would your message to her be? Jacinda, she represents the corruption and the government and the overriding of the people's wishes. What is it your message would be?
If you think that these actions that you've signed up to is going to bring about the greater good by removing the good so you can pursue that, at what point, or have you even bothered to look in the mirror to ask yourself whether that makes any sense at all? Because I have no idea what you're doing. I listen to your speeches on the UN world stage, and all I hear is contradiction. The only way to pursue something better is to work towards being more consistent with your words. You speak with a forked tongue, and you speak in contradictions. To me, I have an issue with that, because if you're pursuing the greater good, and those are your words, what is good?
Interesting, Craig. As someone whose life has literally been turned upside down because of this and other governments. Look down that camera and use the name.
I'm probably not quite going to be quite as wordy as you.
Yeah, that's me.
Excuse me, Cinda, can I actually talk to who's really in charge?
Yeah. That's better. That's better.
What a note to end on. What an interesting conversation. Thank you both. And let's follow up again. We need to keep this Marsden Point now. Really, every month, a little update to see what's happening and how we're going. And I pray that lots of Kiwis now sign up.
It is the best kept secret in this country. Even people that live in Whangarei don't even know we've got a refinery.
Yeah.
Or how important it is to every Kiwi life.
Well, they will know how important it is when they start getting rationed.
Yeah.
I've already seen on national telly that they've been talking about, they brought back Carlos Days as a conversation piece. Is that the preemptive strike?
And none of this needs to happen if we had competent people running this country. Thank you both. Really appreciate the talk.